The parody movie. Usually about as low as you can get on the quality spectrum when it comes to movies. 99 times out of 100, that's exactly how it is. Now, to be fair, there have been some diamonds in the rough, but we all know that if we're seeing a parody, then chances are it'll be anywhere from funny for all the wrong reasons to absolutely awful. And as the title of this video implies, today I want to explore why that is. Why so few parodies hit the mark they intend to. But before we begin, I would just like to warn you that spoilers for anything I bring up in this video may abound. So if there's something you're planning on watching and don't want ruined, just please be on the lookout for it. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's get right into it. Now, when you really get down to it, a parody's job is basically to point out, make fun of, or at the very least exaggerate aspects of something. And in most cases, it's a specific movie or genre that is the subject of the parody. But as I just spent the last minute emphasizing, most movies end up getting it wrong, and very wrong at that. But you notice what usually does tend to get it right more often than not? TV shows. Think about it. Whether it's an entire episode or just a quick gag, some of the most famous comedy shows ever made have been able to pull off some of the most hilarious parodies in history, from the Carol Burnett Show to The Simpsons. Some of their most famous moments were parodying famous movies. Now, from there, the question to ask is, why is TV seemingly better at pulling off parodies than movies are? Well, and keep in mind, I am no expert in this field, so this is only my best guess, but I'd have to say that length has a lot to do with it. Because if a writer thinks of a single joke parodying a movie, they can easily just put it in as a gag, and even when entire episodes are dedicated to a specific parody, they really only have to come up with 20 to 40 minutes worth of jokes. A feature film, however, is usually no less than an hour and a half, which can make it much easier to run out of material quickly, especially if you don't have many ideas to begin with. Other factors include that TV shows have existing characters to use these jokes on, which gives the writers an extra layer of context to help make the parody work that movies usually don't have, as well as the fact that a lot of comedy show writers are more likely to know how to write parodies because they're so popular on television shows these days. And if you know anything about movies, you'll know that the experience of any given writer can be much more erratic and not guaranteed, especially when it comes to a genre most studios don't have much faith in to begin with. But another important factor here, no matter the media it's being written in, and something that a lot of people wouldn't think of at first, is if the subject of parody even should be parodied. And to use an excellent example of what I'm talking about here, Eric Idle explained in an interview why they decided not to parody Jesus Christ directly in Monty Python's Life of Brian, and to instead only satirize religion in a broader sense, as well as the time period he lived in. Because according to him, quote, we realized we couldn't really write about JC because there's nothing you can really complain about. The man saying, blessed are the poor, feed and help people, unquote. In other words, they realized there was absolutely nothing to parody in a man who simply told people to be nice to each other and never did a documented thing wrong in his entire life. So not only were there absolutely no jokes to be had, but any they would have come up with would have been in very bad taste. And thus, they treat him with respect whenever he appears in the film, and the parody is placed squarely on the people who observe his teachings in ways that completely miss the point, and things of that like. In other words, they rightly realize that if there's nothing to parody or complain about in something, then you shouldn't be parodying it. Because then there's absolutely no point to the joke in the first place. Parodies are built on there being something to mock or exaggerate. So it's kind of important that you make sure first there is something to satirize. Now, you'd think that this would be writing 101 for parody writers, but this is actually where a lot of them screw up. Because the majority of parodies are realized after something becomes extremely popular, and is whoever's way of making it trying to capitalize on that popularity. But the problem is that they're trying to get it out so quickly, they never once stop to even ask themselves if it's something that should be parodied in the first place. And when the answer is no, the movie's doomed from conception, because most of the jokes are destined to fall flat. For instance, take this scene in an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants where he sees that a new Mermaid Man movie is coming out. His excited response is, "Wow, another Mermaid Man reboot. It's how I always reimagined the reboot would be remade." Now, the thing is, that parody lands right on the nose, because in two sentences, the writers are perfectly satirizing how Hollywood has become overly saturated with reboots, remakes, and reimaginings, especially when it comes to superhero movies. Therefore, it's the perfect target for parody and fits perfectly within the episode. Now contrast that with this scene in Meet the Spartans, where a mock-up of Leonidas kicks Britney Spears into a hole in an obvious send-up of the iconic scene in 300. But the difference here is, the only reason this movie exists in the first place is because of that movie's popularity. And the only reason he kicks Britney Spears into the hole was because she was a popular punching bag at that time. And thus, the joke falls flat because there's absolutely no reason for it. There's no underlying punchline to be had, other than the writers wanting to capitalize on some popular trends. Now, one thing a smart parody could have done instead is research odd things Spartans actually didn't like and have that be who or what he kicks into the hole. Because at least something along those lines would have been an actual joke. Him kicking Britney Spears and other singers just because they were popular is not. And on that topic, let's get into perhaps the biggest reason why most parodies fail. And simply put, they don't understand what they're parodying in the first place. And that's why even when they do pick something that's a great target, most parody movies don't work. But to perhaps best demonstrate what I mean here, let's actually take a look at what's considered to be one of the greatest parody movies ever, Young Frankenstein. Now, what makes this one work so well? Because simply put, Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder knew what they were parodying. They loved those old Universal horror movies, and the whole thing was simply a good-natured ribbing of them. But even more importantly, they understood how the story of Frankenstein goes. And a quick spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't want it ruined, but Universal made 4 Frankenstein movies in total, and in every single one of them the scientist makes the same mistake. He refuses to take responsibility for his creations. And the reason Young Frankenstein has a happy ending is because Wilder and Brooks knew the finer details of those earlier movies. And thus, what leads to the peaceful resolution is the fact that this Frankenstein actually does take responsibility for his creation and refuses to give up on him until he fixes him. And there are other examples of this scattered throughout the movie as well, how well they did their research. And of course, the funny jokes do also deserve a bit of credit here as well, but I think you get what I'm driving at here. Now, in contrast, most other parody movies only have a surface level knowledge of whatever it is they're parodying, and hence their jokes and plot don't work nearly as well. Because not only do the jokes really not land, but they also portray just how little the writers actually understand what they're parodying. To use that same writer as an example, the whole reason for that, that's right, the first fart joke happened for an actual reason and not just to appeal to the lowest of the low. But even other jokes from that same movie happen for a reason, because Mel Brooks is a really great comedy writer. But it's not just because he makes funny movies, but it's also because they're intelligently written. You can tell he understands whatever it is he's writing about. And that's why his movies tend to stand out in a genre that's infamous for producing some of the most bottom of the barrel movies out there. So, simply put, the worse a parody is, the more likely it is that not a lot of effort was really put into it. And that'll only ever lead to its detriment, never its benefit. Because just like with any other movie genre out there, a level of research must be done. And very few are willing to do it, it seems. You have to know if what you're parodying even should be parodied, what aspects of it should be parodied, and perhaps most importantly, making sure the jokes work in context. And it's amazing how many filmmakers out there don't follow these very basic rules when it comes to making these kinds of movies. Alright, I think that's about everything I have to say. So now I want you to tell me, why do you think most parody movies are so bad? Or do you believe there's nothing wrong with them? Please feel free to let me know in the comments. And remember, if you hate everything I said in this video and think I have it all wrong, that's fine. Also, I'm not saying that every bad parody out there is made by talentless losers who didn't bother to do a lick of research. That's not at all the point of this video. My only intention here was to explain why most parodies are considered bad, not to promote any hate surrounding the people who make them. I'm sure most of them are just fine people and maybe even quite talented, but have to deal with a lot of stress and deadlines. Finally, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate all your support, and I hope to see you all next time.